Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Big Home Ed Conversations. My name is Kelly, and as usual, I'm here with Ashley.
Hi.
And we are going to be talking to you guys today about basically difficult conversations. So when things get a little bit tricky, and ultimately how important it is that we really don't keep approaching every conversation with anxiety, especially in the early stages when we're brand new, that we're not kind of constantly approaching kind of conversations with people about home education, feeling anxious, worrying about what they're going to say, trying to convince them what we're thinking about doing with our kids is right and the right choice, etc. And just kind of embracing our own kind of conviction, like really working on our own conviction. We thought this was a really good follow-on from kind of critical thinking and forming our own opinions and starting to recognise that actually so often when we approach these conversations, we're kind of looking for reassurance and for somebody else to tell us that we're making the right choice. And we really need to make sure that we're not approaching conversations most of the time, unless they're obviously very, very important to us, looking for that reassurance that ultimately we want to be building that from within ourselves. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We thought we'd share our funny story of the week. So I managed to really humiliate myself. It was just yesterday morning. I went for my flu jab, and it was like a military operation. I've never seen anything like it. You literally walked through this like one-way system through the GP surgery, and you literally like ducked into a room for a few seconds, gave them your details, they stab you with a needle, and you just walk out. It's the most efficient thing I've ever seen in my life. And I barely even had a chance to sit down when this lovely gentleman obviously prepared the injection, and they took my details, and he stuck it in my arm, and it literally I just went, my God, I've got the smallest needle on the planet. I said I barely even felt that. I was just totally innocent. I mean, my goodness, I was not intending with any innuendo in that. But obviously the gentleman blushed, and I blushed, and the nurse nearly fell off her chair. She was just like, they were both just dying. They were just like, well, at least you didn't say a ruder word, otherwise that really would have been in trouble. And I was like, can I go now? I was literally just humiliated myself. Can I just leave now, please?
You know, that was probably the highlight of the nurse's day, though. Like, that's got to be so boring. And she just was like, that I needed that laugh. Thank you.
Literally, as I walked away, I could hear them both literally cackling in the room behind me. I'm just like, oh my God. I was like, Kelly Riggs, seriously, can you walk into a room and not humiliate yourself? Just once, it would be lovely. My social skills are still in progress.
Oh no,
Anyway.
It's funny. That's so funny.
So good. Oh dear. But anyway, so talking of fun conversations, I thought that was a good appropriate one anyway. So we were kind of talking about this before, and we were saying that it's really hard because when I was first starting out as a home educator, I was coming at it from a place of being first generation home educator. My parents obviously hadn't considered it for me and my sister. We had a difficult time as children. My sister especially didn't enjoy being at school. And so ultimately me choosing to home educate, not only directly conflicted maybe with their values and beliefs around education, but also essentially, I guess it just really stressed them out because I had postnatal depression with both of my children. Like, I didn't have easy pregnancies. I didn't have sort of an easy time of it as I was getting used to being a parent. And they did have their concerns for me and my mental health and how I was going to cope with quite a high responsibility task, really. And ultimately, they were raising their concerns, and we went round in circles quite a few times. And I really felt like they kind of just kept sort of thrusting the same 2 or 3 things at me and sort of saying that they had a right to their opinions and that that obviously I needed to kind of like reassure them, basically. And in the end, I had to set a really firm boundary, and I had to say, look, enough. Like, I've answered you. I think I have reassured you enough. Like, I've said what I needed to say. It's not my job to convince you. Go do your own research. Go figure it out. But ultimately, I'm making a choice for me and my family. I'm a grown woman. These are my kids. I'm making a choice. Agree with it or don't. It's not up to you. Yeah. And it did create some tension, and it was a really hard time for us in our relationship because I really felt like for months after that all I ever wanted to do was convince them. I just wanted them to believe what I believed and trust in what I trusted in. And that it did feel quite scary there weren't necessarily, like, after the initial kind of pushback when I kind of said, look, I'm setting a boundary here, please do not cross this line again, like, that's enough, that they did obviously then get on board. They have been listening to me, they've been learning, they've been doing their own research, and they have come around to it, and they've obviously been able to see it working over the years. So it's not created a lasting issue, but it definitely, there was worry, in like welfare worries about myself, my kids, their future, and they obviously, to some degree, yes, they're my parents, they're directly related to my children, they care about them, they want to make sure that we're all considering our options and being thorough in that, and to some degree I can respect them having their opinions on something like that. Of course I can. But I mean, did you come across this much in your kind of early days, Ashley? Did you have anybody kind of pushing back or worried about you making the decision?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that what you're talking about with those family dynamics really come into play even with every aspect of parenting, right? So when you do something different than your parents, even if it's something like we do bedtime differently or we do whatever it is differently, then they start to question, well, why? It worked for you, it worked for us. And almost, it's very easy, I think, for them to take it as a personal insult, even if it's not meant that way at all, right? We're all just trying to do the best that we can, and every parenting generation is going to change and tweak things based off of their own experiences. And then, of course, the more information that we have available to us these days, obviously it's ever changing, ever growing. And so with the more information that we have, the different decisions we will make from the people who raised us. And so I think that that piece of it definitely is tricky to navigate around because, you know, similarly with my parents, they just sort of were questioning, like, why would you ever do that? Right? Because it's not anything that they've ever personally researched. It's not anything they've ever questioned. Why would you not send your kids to school? Like, it's not even a question they've ever asked themselves. And then I think it's also the result of everything they've ever heard about homeschooling, because whenever it's like sensationalized, it's always portrayed in a negative way. Like, there's not these amazing stories about homeschoolers out there, right? Like, they don't say like, oh my gosh, homeschooling's amazing, look at this famous scientist. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. So, you know, there are plenty of famous scientists that are homeschooled, but that's not the part they advertise. And so I think that that kind of combination of this being something totally out of the like status quo is totally different and definitely a minority decision. Largely, I'm sure also because not everyone can homeschool. Like, you might need two incomes. You might not have that capability, or maybe you just don't want to. Like, maybe that is something for you that isn't going to work. So, and that's totally fine. So I think that, you know, when you have those conversations, like you were saying, it definitely can be tricky, and you do have to set a boundary. And I think, like, for me, I've certainly been approached, especially when I was living in Italy. Homeschooling is so rare that you just don't, you might know one person that does it, or probably you don't know anyone that does it. Compared to the US and the UK, that's obviously a very different situation here than I had when I was in Italy. And so when someone learns, for however it comes up, that we're home educating, because it's not the norm, because it's different, you instantly have to decide, is their questioning or response coming from a place of caring and curiosity, or is it just judgment, right? Or like a knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, that's interesting, why are you doing that? Like, maybe they don't even care. It's just like their knee-jerk reaction is to respond, right? And our trained response is to also respond. And so you kind of get locked into this conversation. But I think, like, the instant I meet someone who asks me about homeschool, or after finding out that we homeschool, not because I'm like walking around saying we are, I am instantly thinking about my plan for the conversation. So how far am I going to take this? Or am I just going to try to shut it down as quickly as possible to avoid just a uncomfortable situation for everyone, right?
Yeah. Do you know what's really interesting in what you said then about kind of like, how far am I going to take this? Like, what kind of level am I going to get to? Because I was laughing with someone yesterday about how you don't mean to become so completely entrenched in kind of understanding the potential government agenda behind schooling, and obviously how difficult, like you hear all the time, obviously very much one-sided side of things really in the home ed community, of families who are having a really hard time with schooling, like experiences their children are having are not good, and like stem from everything from school lunches being chronically underfunded and no chefs to people getting physically abused. And it means that we obviously hear an awful lot of the negative side of things, so it's very difficult not to kind of remain balanced and to understand all the different kind of outlooks. And so I do find myself, especially now that I'm so well read and care so much about this and I'm so passionate about it, I find it very hard to talk to parents who are very kind of I don't know, for want of a better word, maybe the child is having a hard time but they're not considering home education. I find it so difficult not to go into that conversation with a look, like, seriously, you need to really seriously be considering other options, and this could be what's going on, and this could be what's going on, and you really need to know what their inclusion policy is, and blah blah blah. Like, I have to really kind of rein myself in sometimes and go, look, stop, like, you're not, like, your job isn't to go around converting everybody to home ed. That's not what we do.
Right.
At the end of the day, if they come to me and they say, hey, I'm thinking about home educating my kids, can you tell me everything? Then of course, like, they're going to get like the full package, but I'm not going to like force it upon people who genuinely believe in the school system. Maybe their kids are doing absolutely fine. Maybe this is just the way they want to be. Maybe they know all this, but they don't really want to get involved with it all. Whatever. And it is really hard, because especially when you're really passionate about something, and obviously as someone with ADHD, I can't help myself but get very excited about stuff, and I can sometimes get a bit carried away. So I think in the early days, I had to really make sure that, well, a lot of the time I was doing the self-work to keep supporting myself, building my own conviction, like reassuring myself that my decision was the right one, and stop kind of looking for that outside reassurance from people who don't do it. Like, there's a great phrase somewhere that I saw once that was saying about how you wouldn't ask advice on how to climb Mount Everest from someone who's never left their sofa. Like, you'd go and speak to someone who's done it and you'd learn from them. So don't, like, if you're considering home education and you're feeling a bit stressed and a bit worried about it, then don't try and seek reassurance from someone who has sent their 3 kids to school and has never questioned it a day in their lives. Like, they're not going to give you advice that is actually going to help you. You need to be speaking to someone who's done it and can reassure you that it's valid and viable and that you can do it, and that you'll be capable and blah blah blah, and I can actually give you the resources, point you in the right direction for advice, like all of those things. That ultimately we can't trust conversations with people who don't have a clue about it to make us feel better. Chances are actually they're really going to do the opposite. They're going to start to fill up our brains with things that make us actually feel a lot more anxious.
Yeah, that's right. It's important to find your community, right? And to really, when you're looking for those reassurances or when you have questions about things, to be able to go to those who are either in it with you in that moment or have been through it, right? And there's so many like amazing seasoned homeschoolers that you can reach out to. Even just here in like our local community, there are plenty. So, and it is nice to be able to get that validation that, look, their kids are doing great. they've grown up home educated and they're doing wonderful. And then also just to be able to get ideas from them, and, you know, certainly then as we continue along the process, you know, we become those more seasoned people. But, you know, still have a ways to go here. It's only my 5th year.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the thing. I mean, I consider myself to be pretty knowledgeable about home education, but I know that I've got many, many years ahead of me of various different challenges, including them getting older, and obviously just parenting challenges, like all the different shifts and changes that are down the line. I'm terrified about, but who knows? Anyway, let's not think about that right now. Sorry, there's been croaky throats on the way out. But yeah, I think let's like really kind of consider, like, in these moments when you're talking to people, what the actual kind of outcome is going to be. So I think what's really important for me nowadays is whenever I do approach a conversation with someone, obviously, now that I actually have got some years under my belt and I know what I'm talking about to some degree, is to really kind of consider what the goal is. And that when you are talking to people about it, so say, for example, you've got an example when I was quite early on, I was sat in the outside bit of my son's music lesson. It was like a drop-off thing. So the parents just sort of sat outside, kids went inside the building. And some parents were kind of chatting about their various school experiences. One of their daughters wasn't doing brilliantly. She was quite stressed and anxious. We're talking like reception year 1 age, like very young, and really not coping brilliantly with going into school. And the parent was kind of saying something along the lines of, well, she's just going to have to toughen up because this is school and she's going to have to go, and that's the way it is. Like, you haven't got any other choices. And I just kept them. I was just like, I'm not in the mood. I don't want to get into this conversation. Like, I can quite clearly see that they are very sternly like, this is the way education happens. And actually, I found myself feeling quite anxious and quite stressed. And they turned the conversation to me, just feeling like suddenly that they obviously hadn't been including me in the conversation and wanted to be polite, I guess, and asked me which school my son went to. And in that moment, I could feel every bit of my body being like, oh no, like, God, just go back to your own conversation. Like, it's fine. I don't want to be involved in this one, thanks. And so I was just like, oh, not from around here, like, we're all the short way. And so she just tried to like just deflect it off. And they're like, oh, which one? And I was just like, we home educate. Like, I was just like, come on, be brave. Just say it. We home educate. And I was like, I'm not ashamed of it, of course. But I was like, I just wasn't in the mood for the questions.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think in that moment, I knew, I could sense it. I knew what was coming. My spidey senses were teaching me well that this was not a conversation that I was going to particularly enjoy, that I was about to be questioned on my sanity, I suppose, for want of a better word. Like, I think I went through a phase of deflecting it all with like, yeah, I know I'm nuts. Like, don't worry about it. Like, this really kind of self-depreciating kind of like just deflecting it before they had a chance to say it, I guess. And I think it's really sad, actually, that was how I felt in those moments, that really I was expecting that I was going to get some negativity and people being shocked and like kind of like the things that they say, like, oh, you're so brave, and all that nonsense. And it's just like, yeah, no, like, it's not really brave, is it, to just spend a bit of extra time with your kids? And yeah, we're still responsible for their education at the end of the day, regardless of whether they're in school. But what I've kind of learnt from those moments when she was quite forceful in her questioning after that, and I did feel a little bit affronted, and it did earworm me a bit, and I did come away from it feeling quite anxious and a little bit upset and not particularly enjoying talking to them. I had like the rest of the obviously the term of lessons to be sitting there with them to go through as well, which wasn't great. But what I've learnt from those moments is that when we enter into these conversations, we have got to be considering what the outcome or the goal is. So, do we actually care about this person? Like, does their opinion matter? So obviously that if it's your partner or if it's your parents or if it's someone who really does matter to you, like a really close friend or somebody else who's involved with your children, of course, their opinions matter. And so you are going to have to try and get through that conversation and do whatever you can to kind of stay calm, reassure yourself, like get all your research done, get your ducks in a row, and that's fine. But when it comes to people like them, who were not my friends, they were not in my direct circle, I saw them for half an hour, once a week, and not forever either. Like, I didn't need to convince them. I didn't need to get them on side. I didn't need to spend ages pandering to that behaviour. What I should have done, and what I would have done if I could go back now and deal with the same thing, is I would have gone, hey, like, okay, you have your concerns, clearly, but I just want to reassure you that he's good, he's fine. We've made a conscious decision based on it's a passion-based decision. But we're fine. Thank you for your concerns. Like, just go back to your conversation, please. Just leave me alone. Like, you don't need to, like, come at me. And I think I'm obviously a bit more succinctly than that. I'm not finding the right words, but I definitely would find myself in that situation, just backing away and just being like, okay, like, never mind, probably quite politely, just like, do you know what, we don't need to get into this, or like, sorry, I'm just doing something on my phone. Apologies. Like, I'll chat to you about it another time. And just like deflect it away. Just find a way to bat it off, because ultimately we don't owe people like that who are strangers. They're not important. We don't have to teach them anything. We don't have to waste our time. And I think you always say that ultimately it's like we're not here to educate everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've come to the realization after, kind of blundering through conversations with strangers for the first couple of years, especially again in Italy, because it's just so very different. Homeschooling is absolutely done there, and it's just not as popular. So you really don't encounter it often. And so suddenly people really do have genuine curiosity, but other people don't. And I did feel like I had to answer all those questions. And I do feel like it's, going through the school system as we did. Growing up, you learn to just answer the question. You feel rude if you don't, right? And so I finally came to that realization that, I've done so much research on this. I love it. It is my passion. I spend a ton of time doing it. And I spend a ton of time researching it to make sure I'm doing it the way I want to do it. And so I could talk to you about this for hours, but I will say to someone, I might even say it jokingly like that, like, oh my gosh, I could talk to you about homeschooling for hours. So what kind of information are you looking for here? Are you just genuinely curious and, I'm happy to answer any questions, or are you, is this just something where you were just asking, but really you don't want to get into it because I don't want to waste your time, And I think that being able to push back even when things, because sometimes people do come pretty hot, like they do come in, and I'll say that to them, like, hey, we just met and you're coming in pretty hot here. Like I used to use that in some of my business as well when we would get some aggressive customers, just to pause for a second and just be like, hey, I'm a person here. I can't, just like you go into any doctor's office now, and this is something I only see in England. I don't see it in the States, but they have the signs up like, don't abuse our staff, and if you do, you'll be sent out, which I think is really nice. And I actually have a story about a situation like that happening at my GP when I had first moved here. Not personally, but I witnessed it, and it was shocking. And the doctor came out, and I'll tell you about it one time. But anyway, or maybe it'll be our funny story, or not really funny, but somewhat funny story in a future podcast. But yeah, and so I kind of feel that way. Like sometimes people they just run with something, and they're not really actually considering that you're a person, and they can't just ask you personal questions.
And I think sometimes they're coming at it from a place of being so defensive too, right? Like they're basically, they themselves in themselves are going, well, what's wrong with school? Like I send my kids to school, okay, they have a hard time sometimes, but don't they need to go to school? Like they need to get their education. Like how else are they going to get their exams? How else are they going to go on to university? And I think if we're dreadfully honest with ourselves, I mean, I'd certainly Googled all those questions myself before I chose to home educate. Like, is home education legal? Like, will they still be able to sit their exams? Like, what are the outcomes for home educated kids? Can I have some examples, please, of home educated, like, people who have done really well? Like, you do find yourself wanting that reassurance. And so ultimately, when someone tells you that, especially if you're not actually aware, and what's really shocking is obviously how many people aren't aware that home education is even a choice. That obviously you do get these moments when they are going to feel defensive, like we're saying with our parents or with partners or whoever, that actually people can sometimes be quite well subscribed to the school system. They might genuinely have had a good experience, or maybe they believe it's a rite of passage, or they feel like it's an important experience to kind of toughen us up for the real world or whatever. So they're going to have their opinions, and they're also going to feel quite defensive potentially about their own beliefs. And so we have got to be really mindful that if our beliefs directly contradict their beliefs, that going into that conversation with the intention to thrust our beliefs upon them, no matter how well intentioned, is very likely to receive a defensive response. And so ultimately it's not entirely their fault if they do then get defensive, because ultimately we have started something potentially, like if it is us who started it, like we have said something which has directly contravened their beliefs. So it does create that natural conflict. And I think as I say, we were allowed to set boundaries and say, actually, I don't want to go there. Actually, thanks. Like, let's move on. And we're allowed to tell people if they're not being polite. But I think we can also, like, I was at a street party once actually, and I had a couple of the neighbours just being like, "Oh, you home educate, don't you?" And one conversation was really lovely, relaxed, balanced, conversational, curious, and I was more than happy to educate and to answer questions. I was in the mood to. It was fine. I felt resourced. But another conversation I had was actually more pointed, and they were quite kind of like concerned, sort of welfare level concerned of like, but does that mean that your children aren't like regularly being seen by teachers, or like nobody's actually going to be checking up on them? Like surely, like they should be being seen. And I'm just like, well, they're here. They're right here. Like
you're seeing them.
You're seeing them. Like, I don't lock them in the basement. I promise. They are seen by doctors, nurses, hospital staff when they fall off their bike. Like, all these different things. Like, they are being seen. They are, like, being taken care of. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're welcome to chat to them. You're welcome to reassure yourself. And genuinely, as much as it is, like, borderline offensive in those situations.
Yeah, I would also find myself...
Yeah, I felt reasonably offended by it, but I was just like, okay, look, I understand that you have clearly got a welfare concern here. And you know what? Well done for being a good human. Well done for caring about my kids. And well done for checking up on that and making sure that we are taking care of them, because not enough of us do that, right? Not enough of us keep an eye on our neighbours and make sure that people are actually being good people. Like we should be caring about each other's kids. That's important. And so ultimately the conversation was fine. I diffused it. We moved on. But yeah, it is hard. Like, you're dealing with people potentially sometimes that are just like, okay, you clearly are feeling defensive, you're feeling anxious about something yourself, and you've triggered something in them by telling them what you do. And I'll say these are rare, like really rare conversations. I want to stress that. Like, I'm literally talking like, I think maybe three conversations in 4 years that have been slightly more pointed than the average, but not hugely disrespectful, just a little bit kind of like, ooh, I feel a little bit like I've got to defend myself here. As you say, it's the people pleasing. It's that people pleasing nonsense that comes in then, where we feel like we owe them now a response, and we don't. Truly, we don't. Like, we can just say, look, here's a great website. Go and have a read. Like, there's so much information on there. It will help you to understand. So what I really love that question, kind of like, do you actually want to know more, or like, are you just being polite? Because like, I could talk to you about this forever. So I don't
want to trap you in that conversation. Exactly. And then just by laughing it off. Yeah. It's definitely one of those things where, you know, and you were kind of saying this before, when you're coming at it from two very different perspectives. If I'm talking to a family who has their 5 kids in the school system, I'm probably not going to have a productive conversation about home education. And even though they are asking me questions about it, they probably don't. They ask them in a way where it's like how you were saying before. It's not like, oh my gosh, tell me more about that. It's like, oh, I don't know how you do it. I could never do that. Well, that is not the tone of someone who wants to be swayed. You know,
no.
They want to be assured that they're doing the right thing. And so that's when, you know, if you're like, oh, I could never spend that much time with my kids. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I enjoy my kids. I mean, I had them.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's an interesting one.
But that's okay. You do you.
Yeah, that phrase is really triggering for a lot of us, isn't it? It's quite interesting. I see this quite a lot in the like Facebook forums and stuff, where people get a bit sort of upset with people kind of saying, oh gosh, I could never like spend that much time with my kids, or like, oh my goodness, like, no way, like I'd never be able to get everything done. And it's so interesting because I always find myself just thinking, do you know what? It's great that you know your own limits. Like 100%. If you really don't feel like actually having them home all the time would be good for your family, and you genuinely feel like that actually this is where it comes down to conscious educational choice, in my opinion. If a family have made a conscious choice based on their children's welfare, to have them in school, for them to be working, to do whatever it is that is necessary for all of them to maintain their mental health, their finances, their home life, whatever, great. But it is that really kind of cavalier, like I say, the issue we obviously strike with it is obviously the idea that people just like, oh God, I wouldn't want to spend this time with my kids. Like, yeah, okay, it's not the nicest thing to say directly to your children, or in front of them, of course.
Especially when they're there. Like, yes, people will say that in front of their own children. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I know. Or like they'll be sort of sitting there going, gosh, counting down the days until you're back in school, like to their faces. Like it is a bit like, ooh, jarring. But I understand. I always try and come at these things with compassion and understanding that obviously
it is hard. It's hard.
I don't know what they're
walking
hard. Through. Yeah, like I don't know what they're walking through. I don't know what their life is like. I don't know what they're dealing with. And obviously I have said to my own children in the past, like, I am seriously considering like whether or not home ed is right for us right now. Like this is not really working. Like we are literally like driving each other bonkers, and you guys are just resisting everything I say, and it's hard. And so sometimes we get into like a bit of a fit with that too, right? So anyway, we're on a bit of a tangent now, but I think it's really important when we're thinking about starting a conversation with someone, or we are finding ourselves in one, that we really consider why it is that we are talking about it. Like, if it's coming up naturally, fine. If you are, I mean, I for a while was anxiously just chucking it in there just to kind of get it off my chest, just so I've said it and I could just move on. But we've got all these different reasons why we might be having these conversations. Like, I don't know, more important ones, for example, talking to our partners. So this can be a really tricky moment. Because I think both me and you had issues in the beginnings with partners not necessarily being on board. And those are tricky conversations. My God, like those are important and those are tricky. Because ultimately, if you are starting to really passionately believe that home education is right for your children and for you, potentially in your kind of lifestyle, what you want to do, and your partner's kind of like, oh, I don't really know about this. Like, I'm not sure this is the right idea. Or maybe they were quite academic, or maybe they believe in sort of more disciplined side of things or whatever. That these are really hard moments.
Yeah. And I think for my husband, he did not enjoy school, so fair enough there. But it definitely was, again, something that you never questioned. So why would we not send our kids to school, right? What would be the reasoning behind that? And I think it also depends on how open like that person is to research and information, because at the end of the day, like, you're still going against a societal norm, right? You are going to become the only family on the block that homeschools, and that kid is only seen, at some certain sports or things on the weekend, but not necessarily at the bus stop. Or, I mean, I know you guys don't have bus stops the same way we did in the States, but yeah, so I think that can be just, it just feels uncomfortable, right? To go against something that is so normal. And I think he had a fear that our kids would be the weird kids, or that they would just be odd. And so part of that has been, helped just by, time and seeing over time all that they do and all the things that they're involved in, and how much they're with other kids, and, having experiences, that all kids are having. And then I think the other part of it is just sort of saying, I think this gets back to the capability to home educate your kids, and the want to, because I think for him, if he were to give up his job to home educate, he would end up resenting the kids, right? Because he would miss the enjoyment and fulfillment that he gets out of his job.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that he at first was just like, well, I don't want to do it, so why would you want to do it? And, obviously that's something that each person has to kind of assess for themselves and then work through. And I think it's still something that he questions, but it is nice. One time we were out having, just some drinks after work with some of his colleagues, and one of the people there had said, oh, my wife homeschooled both our kids, and it was the best decision we ever made, and now his kid's in college and in the States and doing great. And so I think sometimes those little nuggets come through in unexpected ways, and I was just like, oh, I'm so glad I was here to hear this. Like, I'm so glad that someone that he knows and respects homeschooled their kids, and now they're doing great and they're in college, and so that just gives that reassurance. And I think that goes back to just the conversation of having that community to be able to look at and really see the successes that the group as a whole is tracking. Because if you just look at your immediate family, it can be hard because it's not a race, it's a marathon. Teaching your kid to read, it's not like the next day they're reading, right? You're going, weeks and months through different stages, and so the fulfillment is slow. And it's nice to have the community to reach out to see that yes, this does in fact happen, and it's going to work.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you've got that kind of reassurance. I think that's the thing. It's a lot of the kind of the calm that I have now and the passion I have now is literally just built from the conviction that has taken time. It is lots and lots of friendships, lots of witnessing, lots of reading, lots of tricky moments that we've overcome, lots of us kind of like figuring out how to better handle teaching our kids something or showing them something and having them thrive. It's watching them learn to read. It's all these moments when you kind of get that kind of like, oh my goodness, like it really doesn't have to look like school, does it? Or like it really can be done. Like you can trust your kids to pretty much learn this by themselves. Like you don't necessarily need to be putting loads of hours sat with worksheets in front of them into it to make it work. Like you just get these lovely moments that kind of build your conviction. They just help you to stand a little bit taller, just relax your shoulders a little bit more. Like you start to trust the process that little bit more, and slowly but surely you're able to actually just like finally going to go, yeah, okay, like now, because I had a moment last year that really made me laugh, where I had a lady at my son's football approach me. She happened to be a deputy head of I think it was a private school near us, and she was like horrified at the idea of us home educating, and it really made me laugh. It really took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting it. I hadn't had any kind of tricky altercations for a while, and she was so instantly quite adverse to the idea. And I couldn't help but I actually laughed. Like I actually laughed. I couldn't. I guess it maybe just shocked me a little bit, but it amused me, and I found myself being like, "It's fine. Like, don't worry about it. Like, you don't agree with it, that's fine. Like, please just walk away. It's okay." Yeah. Obviously, I didn't say that, but I just found myself feeling quite amused, and it didn't earworm me, and I didn't come away from it feeling anxious. And actually, it just made me smile that actually I've done the work now. Like, I've spent the time with my kids. I've seen them thriving. I know that it's working. I know that it's valid. Like, it's all good. Like, it's fine. And I think that is just something which we don't necessarily have in our arsenal at the very beginning, because we are just so brand new to it, especially if we are first generation home educators. I guess that the truth is, in these moments, is to just, I guess, to summarise, is to take a deep breath, is to recognise as you're kind of approaching any conversation, I'm talking a lady in a supermarket, someone who's important to you, whatever, is to try and recognise, firstly, are they important? Like, does it matter if they actually agree with, support this decision? Am I looking to try and get their reassurance or their permission? Or am I just wanting to tell them all about it because I'm excited? Or like, what is the reason? What's your goal? What's the outcome you're actually going for? And if it is conversion, then you really need to consider how important that person is and whether or not it's appropriate, because it could very well lead to it being defensive and tricky. You're definitely opening a can of worms potentially. And just recognise your own boundaries. Like, recognise whether you've got the spoons. Like, if you are sitting there thinking, actually, gosh, I have not got the energy for this conversation today, much like us and trying to record a podcast yesterday, Ashley. It was just like, haven't got the energy for this today.
Close.
Tried it anyway. Never mind. We did our best. But we have these moments. We've got to recognise, have we got the energy for this conversation? If the answer is no, then don't do it now, because especially if it's important. Like, if you're trying to have a big conversation with your partner and this is the moment, this is when you're hoping that you're going to be able to get him to agree, or she, and you're sitting there kind of having this conversation and you're not resourced, and actually you're getting your hackles up easily, you're getting stressed, you're getting upset, maybe whatever, it's not productive. It's not going to feel good. It's just going to make everything feel rubbish. And actually, if you can really make sure that you are well resourced, you've done a bit of breathing, you've had something to eat, something to drink, you aren't tired, like, do all the things that are necessary for you to feel like, okay, I can have this conversation, I'm feeling good about it, I've done my research, I've got my talking points, like, I'm ready to go. Like, don't rush into these things and basically end up just stressing yourself out in the process. That you are allowed to be really, really mindful and intentional about the conversations you have about home education. And as I say, just I think we've very much highlighted that if you want to have a positive conversation, you're much more likely to have it with someone who actually gets it and doesn't need convincing.
Yes.
So if you need reassurance, talk to somebody who's actually going to reassure you. And that's not to say that people who don't get it won't reassure you, because I'm sure a lot of them will be very positive, and most of the people I speak to are. But do definitely be mindful of not putting yourself into situations too often where you're going to feel attacked, because it's just going to make you feel stressed and anxious, and there's no point doing that to yourself unless you really have to, I guess, is all I would say on this matter, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that the only last thing I would add, which I know we've talked about, is like, and I'm still working on this all the time, as you can tell, trying not to take what they might say personally, because it's usually not about you. It's probably their own defenses and their own just wanting to reassure themselves that what they're doing for their family is right. And it probably is, right? I mean, I think when I speak to people, they're usually very happy with the decisions that they're making, and whether it's to home educate or not. And so I think that if someone comes at you and is sounding a bit defensive about it, or just asks the questions in the way that is a bit negative, why would you ever want to do that? Then it's more about them, and just like you were saying, deflect, or be like, hey, we're all just doing what's right for us. So that's okay.
It's all good. Like you don't have to want to do it. That's fine.
That's okay. I mean, I'm the only one in my family doing it, so I understand the other side as well. So just let it roll off your shoulders and finish your grocery shopping.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think definitely always, as you say, really respect that other person's opinions and beliefs. Like, at the end of the day, they're as much entitled to theirs as we are to ours. And also, just in those moments when we are potentially dealing with that kind of moment, is therefore, as you are respecting it, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I hear what you've got to say. Have that open listening. Actively listen to what they've got to say too. Like, give it the respect that they're giving you, and demonstrate that back to them. And hopefully that will help to diffuse a situation that might be getting a bit heated too, because it allows you to obviously show them that you are respecting them, you are caring about them. But equally, if those opinions are kind of, as you say, beating you down, making you feel rubbish about it, and actually you're starting to feel quite stressed or vulnerable in that situation, set a boundary and move on. Just find a way to deflect the conversation, move away. And I think that's the thing. These are not easy things to navigate sometimes. And as I say, I've put together a whole ebook on this, so I will make sure that people are aware of that when I post about this episode, because it's free. It's just a free ebook thing that literally helps to walk you through some of these sort of tricky moments. So if you are finding yourself in them, then there is that ebook that you can grab as well, if this episode hasn't been enough, to give you some ideas and pointers. But yeah, it's really important for us to really be considering this, because sometimes we will find ourselves going around in circles or finding ourselves in this situation a lot, and that can actually really destroy your confidence and start to make you feel like home ed isn't a good choice, or starts to make you worry about things that you actually don't really need to be worrying about. So just definitely be very, very compassionate towards yourself, as we always say, and stop at the conversations if we feel it's necessary. Oh dear. So I think what I wanted to say to you guys as well, just to kind of wrap this episode up, unless there's anything else you wanted to add, Ashley, are you happy at this point?
I think we've probably exhausted it. I know you and I always get chatting, and then we look at the time and we're like, well, that was 3 hours.
As I say, I think we'll pause it on that conversation there for sure. We'll be back again with another one very soon. Just to let everybody know who is actively listening, and we have had so many more of you actively listening this season, which is so exciting. I think we've had something like got a couple of hundred listens already just at the beginning of this season, which is super exciting.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for everybody who's coming and listening to us and sharing it and talking about it and all the rest of it. But we have actually had something super exciting happen this week. So we are going to be interviewing Wendy Charles Warner, or having a conversation with, to be honest, Wendy from Education Otherwise on Wednesday. So we're going to be recording a special guest episode for you guys that will be coming either next week or the week after. And essentially that is going to be all about, especially if you're new to home education, we're going to be talking about how important it is that you understand your rights, what you're entitled to, and also how to kind of positively work with your local authority as necessary, and all the work that Education Otherwise is doing with the Department of Education and our local authorities to try and improve relations to do with home education. So kind of like what to do, what not to do. And we're also going to be talking about, obviously, the schools bill that Wendy so effectively spearheaded the campaign to remove from Parliament a couple of years ago, with her petition, which I think turned out to be the biggest ever hand-signed petition ever to be submitted to government, from what I understand, which is what an absolutely epic feat. And obviously the fact that, sadly, obviously with the Labour government, we are looking at that register coming back round into government again, where they are trying to push it through again. So we are going to be having to gear up for another fight very soon, and she's going to be talking to us a bit about that as well. So very important episode, and going to hopefully be really insightful, and give us lots of really just great thoughts. So anyone who is fangirling like me at the idea of getting to interview as essentially a home ed celebrity, please do come and join us for that episode when we air it in a week or two. And depending on how long that conversation goes on for, because we've got it for as long as we want to. Like, fingers crossed, we'll get a really good episode or two out of that one. Really excited to obviously chat to her. So do tune in for that. And
just the wealth of knowledge that she has is just amazing to be able to kind of tap into, and very exciting.
Yes, very exciting indeed. Okay, so I am going to say goodnight to you all now, or good morning, whatever time of day it is for you as you're listening to this. Thank you for your patience at this coming a day late. Technical glitches on our first attempt at recording it, which was very frustrating. So hopefully our second attempt has been just as good and you guys can enjoy it. So we'll speak to you again next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.